Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Good Love Podcast, a Good Love project production with your friendly neighborhood sex geek and good lover, Katrina Boots Rainsong. Here at the GLP, we strive for informed, enthusiastic consent, so this is your content warning. The Good Love Podcast is a sex and relationship education podcast directed to adult listeners. We offer playful, powerful, and positive education on sexuality, pleasure, kink, sexual health and wellness, and a slew of other grown and sexy topics. If you find any of these topics objectionable, you're welcome to skip an episode or even the whole show. If you're under 18, we recommend heading over to scarletine.com for all youth-focused sex ed needs. Now, if you're an enthusiastic yes, get comfy and enjoy the show. Hello, good lovers. Welcome back to the Good Love Podcast. I am Katrina Boots Rainsong, your host, your friendly neighborhood sex geek and love coach. And with me is my beautiful girl, Charlie.
I'm Charlie. I'm Charlie. I'm also a bunch of those things and some other things. And some days I'm no things. And some days I am 5 pronouns in a trench coat. And today we are diving in to one of the biggest obstacles in sexual confidence and fulfillment. You want to know what it is? Can you guess? I'll give you a second. It's shame.
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 Shame. Shame. Shame.
Yeah.
Shame has a way of keeping us small, stuck, and disconnected from ourselves and others. So we're going to bust some myths and misconceptions about sexuality that fuel shame and talk about how to embrace your authentic self.
Yes. Embrace her. If this topic hits
Or
close to
him or them.
Yes, you're right. Let me not minimize everyone's authentic experience. Yes, you will embrace your authentic self. And if this topic hits close to home for you, know that you're not alone. We've been there too, and we're here to help you navigate it. Shame is a nasty, nasty beast.
Shame.
Yeah.
And all humans are preloaded with it. So
I do believe it may be just like coded into our DNA, but we can combat it. But before we do that, before we strap on our combat boots to bust up some shame, let's jump into our hot topic.
Hot topics.
This is the part of the show where we break down what's happening in the world of sex, relationships, and sexual health.
Yes, you sent me a wonderful, inspiring story from Belgium. As of December 2024, sex workers there can now sign formal employment contracts that gives them access to benefits like paid sick days, maternity leave, and even health insurance. This is a landmark moment in workers' rights. This is the first country in the world, right?
Yes. Yeah, first country in the world. Back in 2022, they had decriminalized, which is a massive step. And now, it's giving them full workers' rights, labor's rights. This is amazing. The new law also guarantees sex workers the right to refuse specific sex acts or clients without fear of retaliation. Plus, there's a mediation scheme to support them in these situations.
That's huge. For so long, sex work has been marginalized and criminalized in many parts of the world, leaving workers without basic protections. This is a real step towards recognizing sex work as legitimate labor.
Yes.
Which it is.
Hashtag sex work is work.
Yes, it is.
It's seriously a win for dignity and safety. It also raises important conversations about what other countries can learn from Belgium's approach. Could this set a precedent of how sex workers are treated globally? Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And let's also not forget the courage and the persistence of the people that made this happen, like Mel Malicious and the Belgian Sex Workers Union, UTSAPI. This didn't happen overnight. This, like you said, 2022 was when they just barely decriminalized it. And that was a long fight.
Yeah, that was a long time in coming. It's a reminder that systemic change is possible when communities organize and demand their rights. But there's still work to do. For instance, how do we ensure these protections are actually enforced and are not just a law on paper?
Yeah, that is a very good question. And I'm curious, will this law influence public attitudes about sex work in Belgium? sometimes legal recognition can help reduce stigma, but it's not a guarantee. And I don't know what the public opinion of sex work is in Belgium personally.
Right. Yeah. I would imagine that it's maybe a little more open than it is here or in some other countries. Who knows? But there's hope, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we've made this step. Well, they have made this step. And yeah, I hope that it continues to spread as we're able to then see in the future from this, we'll be able to actually see what decrim and full labor rights protections, the benefits of this. Studies are going to be done, and we'll be able to use those studies to help push for more rights in other countries.
Mm-hmm.
Again, fingers crossed. Good lovers, what do you think? Could this approach work where you live? Do you see this as a model for other industries with a history of exploitation or a lack of formal protections? Because sex work is not the only one.
Yeah, let us know. Truly, send us emails at
goodloveproject@gmail.com.
Yeah, send us emails. Let us know. Could this approach work where you live? Why or why not? Those are the questions that we are curious about.
Yes, and we love to hear from you.
Please talk to us.
Yes. Right. So let's get into this episode's topic.
The juicy, juicy topic.
Yes. And to get into the meat or the jackfruit if you're a vegan.
Either way, it's moist. All right, let's start with the basics. What is shame, specifically, and how does it show up around sexuality?
So shame is that voice that tells you you're not good enough or you're doing it wrong. It's different from guilt. Guilt is about actions. You've done something wrong. Shame is about who you are, saying you are wrong or there is something wrong with you. And when it comes to sexuality, shame often comes from cultural messages, religion, or even well-meaning family members. And those messages aren't always open and explicit.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes silence and the lack of communication winds up speaking volumes and really leaving some scars when it comes to shame.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people carry shame without realizing it. Like, how many times have we heard, oh, don't talk about that, it's inappropriate. Or maybe, like, that's all you were told was it was inappropriate. Or you talked about something and just no one said anything. Well, depending on what age that happens at, it can deeply seed shame, beyond what our language is even capable of understanding sometimes. That's why we talked about being so present with yourself in our last episode, because you have to notice, are those voices saying, oh, I'm not good enough, oh, I'm doing it wrong? Or are they also saying things like, that's not how things are done? Are they very definitive? Because that's another way that shame is kind of baked into our cultural messaging from a young age across all sectors of our life. What is and is not appropriate, and even just the uncertainty of that breeds more shame.
Absolutely. We're often taught through media, even not just porn, but even mainstream media, that sex is supposed to look a certain way, pleasure is supposed to look a certain way, or even that only certain people get to have pleasure in their lives, and pleasure becomes a privilege.
Yeah, and you can only earn pleasure after you've done a certain amount of insert whatever. A lot of people with a religious trauma can relate to that. Mm-hmm. A lot of people with, bodies. I was going to say different types of bodies, but honestly, bodies. Because all of us receive messaging around why our bodies are or are not equipped or adequate to receive pleasure. And shame can show up out of anything. You don't get pleasure because you're 5'2" and have freckles. And this is where you indignantly remind me that you are not 5'2".
I am not 5'2". I am a very tall 5'4", 5'4.5". I'm built like an anime girl. I'm short but have ridiculously long legs.
You are all leg.
I am all leg. Sometimes I wish I had the anime boobs. But then I have days like today where I'm like, thank God I don't.
I have the anime boobs for both of us.
Fair.
But that's a great example of something I carried shame around without really realizing it. My boobs carried a lot of shame for me growing up because I received a lot of messaging that my body was not supposed to look the way that it was. I've been wearing bras since I was 8. You have an 8-year-old. Could you imagine her already wearing B-cut bras?
I know that. I'm like, I have other friends that I grew up with that went through that.
Yeah.
And just the way that we, and I talked about this before on the podcast, the way we metaphorize the body. Oh, your body looks like this, so that means this about you.
Right. That it becomes character traits.
Yes.
And that's where that shame being different from guilt. Guilt's about actions, shame's about who you are. So when you're receiving messages about, well, this is your external appearance, this tells me everything I need to know about you. Well, now you are left in a shitstorm of, depending where your confidence comes from, really building shame around factors completely outside of your control. Mm-hmm. I had so much shame around having such a buxom body and being a young girl. Like, I didn't look like the way people treated me. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people, and especially people of color, and Black people in particular, can relate to being treated far older than you actually are. And the psychological experience that causes you to go through, being treated as not your age and people approaching you outside of your age. And then being chastised for existing in the wrong space with an adult that didn't know how to control themselves. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Amazing. So shame does come a lot from silence. And like you were saying, it does thrive in silence.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to name it and to understand where it's coming from. This is one of my little sayings. I have my little good love sayings is name it, don't shame it. Whether that is talking about your body, your sexual interests, your fetishes. I work with a lot of clients that have a particular fetish and have all kinds of deep-seated shame around it because we pathologize such things. Even though, so many of them are completely harmless, Yeah. Okay, you have a fetish for stockings. You're not hurting anyone.
Yeah. Or, I've had clients that are very into feet or, just discovering that they're very into feet. Mm-hmm. But because that is outside of what they've been taught to be norm, there's so much shame around it. And I'm like, this is easy. Mm-hmm. You want to smell me? I haven't even showered. I don't have to do shit. I don't have to sit here and you love this. This. Where is the shame coming from? But that's the thing. Shame is not about logic.
Shame
is never about logic.
It's never about logic. It is often something that can become the thing that makes you feel that you are unlovable or undateable. And I have a firm belief that no one is unlovable.
No one is unlovable. No one is undateable. Yeah. And there's obviously, we've talked about skills and things to work through, getting in touch with yourself and being able to address and name your shame is a way to combat that intrinsic feeling of oh, I'm unlovable. That comes from shame. That's entirely shame speaking. This idea that again, it's about what you are, right? I am unlovable. And that's so untrue. It's untrue. And then when you say it out loud and you begin to notice, okay, is that true or am I just experiencing shame in this moment?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And one of my core concepts as a coach is that truth and information shuts down shame. Because a lot of shame is also based in ignorance or in misinformation, right? Say, oh, no, you're into XYZ. Nobody does that.
And in fact, I can literally find you 20 people right now that do that.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, you see the studies oh, kink is for like weirdos and perverts. Nobody actually does that. Oh, guess what, guys? Like 40+% of Americans have dabbled in BDSM in one way or another. That's almost half.
That's almost half.
That's a big number.
And that's just of the sample size they found.
Exactly.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
So let's get into the myth busting. That's what we're here for. Heavy on the busting. That's just a booby joke. So what's one of the biggest myths about sexuality that you think fuels shame?
The real big one is one that I mentioned earlier, that there's a quote-unquote right way to have sex, whether that's how you look, what you enjoy, or how often you have sex. This idea that there's a normal sets people up for shame.
Yes.
And you see articles on this all the time, like how much sex should you be having as a married couple, or, you know, how much sex should you be having as a single? And the answer is as much as you would like to have and that your partners are down for.
Right. How much can you safely enjoy?
Yeah.
There is no should. And I understand where that pathologizing starts to show up, but it just is such a lie. There is no one size fits all, and selling us that one size fits all for pleasure and relationship, it's just there to sell. It really is literally that. It's just there to sell some variation of here's what's wrong with you and here's why you need whatever it is we're trying to get you to understand. So much of our messaging is just about profiting off of our insecurities and feeding into that shame. There is no right way or wrong way to do sex.
Absolutely.
Well, there is a wrong way, which would be the non-consensual.
Would be non-consensual. Yeah.
The wrong way is non-consensual.
To be clear.
So long as it's consensual.
Yes. Yeah, but no, it's, you know, we talk about this idea that like, oh, sex sells. All these different corporations are selling sex. But what they're actually driving, what they're actually advertising is sexual dissatisfaction. Oh, you don't feel sexy, you don't have sexual confidence, you don't feel virile because you need this car, you need this kind of lingerie, makeup, you know, whatever.
To supplement.
Yeah.
Because you're not enough.
Exactly. And of course, particularly, I'm going to speak just to Western American culture right now because that's where we are. We have like this box of what sex is supposed to look like, right? And it's generally conventionally attractive, straight, like cis and straight, married, or in a long-term relationship of some kind. Mm-hmm. Depending on who you're talking to, it might also, these rules might also include for procreation.
Right.
Yeah. It must be procreative.
Going back to our religious trauma.
Yep. Yeah. And so then the further you are away from that box, when we talked about, you know, pleasure being a privilege, who is allowed to have pleasure, the further you go away from that box, the more that you're going to get negative messages from society. But even the people who live in that perfect box and are doing everything quote unquote right often still experience shame.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, because that is not the solution to shame. Is not to be monogamous, cis, straight, married. No, if anything, that's the concept of that is where that shame is seated. Because anything outside of that teeny tiny little box that most people don't believe they even fit into detracts from what sex is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
You know, and what it's supposed to look like is two people showing up and connecting to their actual needs in whatever way that looks like.
Two or more.
Two or more. That's right. Some people arriving to a location undisclosed and having a good time.
Call this number to get the address.
You must RSVP.
Yeah.
Ladies get in free.
Exactly.
So that's one of the biggest myths. That's at least our first myth, that there's no one size fits all when it comes to pleasure or relationships. So what's another myth you hear a lot?
Ooh, you shouldn't talk about sex. We don't talk about that. It's private.
It's private.
It's private, especially for those of us who are socialized as women. Like, nice girls don't talk about that. You know, there's so much. Again, we're talking about, like, we've talked about how shame is fueled by secrecy, or not secrecy. We've talked about how shame is fueled and grows in silence. Well, privacy is important. Absolutely. You're allowed your privacy. Secrecy can lead to shame. So being able to talk openly about sex, whether that's with your partner, with a therapist, you know, it can be really
with
free.
A coach.
With a coach. Yeah. Just being able to be in a room and look someone else in the eye and say, I feel this, I like whatever, or even I don't like, because you're allowed to not like things too. And that is also something that gets shamed, because there's this idea of like being too sexual, just no good. But also, if you're not sexual enough,
also no good. Can't have that.
Yeah, can't have that. What's wrong with you? Yeah. So whatever your feelings about it are, being able to talk freely about it.
Yes. Secrecy leads to shame. So I agree. Talking openly about sex, it has to happen in some context. Yeah, you just have to know that you're not the only person that's dealing with that. And truly, if I can tell you anything that can give you some peace, I hope it's that you are, there are 7 billion people on this planet. Whatever's on your mind, whatever you're experiencing, you are not the only person ever to experience it. Someone else has. And not only has enough other people experience that, like, they probably Googled it. You can probably Google it. You can probably find other people talking about it. You can find people to meet up with who have similar interests, or you can read blog posts about things that, anything you have shame over, someone else is so proud of. Like, there's somebody who's monetizing the thing you have shame over more often than not in some way. You know what I mean? So whatever kind of helps you break through that experience and allows you to really show up. So when we're talking about that, it's a matter of embracing your authenticity. So how can people really start to let go of that shame and really embrace who they really are?
Well, it starts with self-awareness. Pay attention to those moments when you feel shame and ask yourself, where did this message come from? Is it actually true? What story is connected to this? What story am I telling myself? And is this a story that I want to subscribe to? From there, you can begin to rewrite your narrative, to rewrite your story.
Yes, rewrite your narrative. And that takes time. It's not an overnight thing. It's not a one instance you show up for. And if you're in this process and you started to let go of your shame, you know what a deep, deep well it feels like. So, Kat, you have some resources for people if they need a little bit of structure around this, right?
Absolutely, I do. It was something I ran on our social media a year ago, and now I'm making it available for anyone that wants to start this process at any time. It's 30 days shame-free, and what it is 30 questions or journal prompts for you to sit with and really start to unpack your invisible backpack of shame, of misinformation, of messages. And so, you can do, it's 30 days, and I'm going to say, like, it's not a challenge. You don't have to do it as a challenge. So, because some of these things you may need to process.
Yeah.
You may need to sit and process. So don't feel, like you have to get it done in exactly 30 consecutive days.
Yeah, it's not 30 consecutive days. It is 30 instances of sitting and prompts and reflection and support. So yeah, don't feel like you have to rush your way through those. I think that's actually the only time I ever finished a 30-day challenge was that I let it be non-consecutive. And I think I gave myself like 45 days to complete it so that I had time to process in between. So yeah, give yourself a break. You don't need to max out on this. If you do go for the 30 days, and I recommend that you do, know that, yeah, you'll probably stop and have to reconnect with it because it's going to bring up some stuff for you. Yeah. But what did we say earlier? The courage. You have to show up with that courage because that's the price of connection.
Yes.
So to wrap up, unlearning shame is not about ignoring it. It's about challenging it and choosing authenticity instead.
Exactly. And like we said, it's a process. So be gentle with yourself as you unlearn some of those old messages, some of those limiting beliefs. Celebrate small wins. Surround yourself with people who support your growth. And I'm going to remind you too that healing, because this is a form of healing is not linear. So you may sit down with your journal or your email prompt or whatever it is, and you do your processing and you think, cool, I've handled that. And then something may come up that re-triggers that shame or those feelings. And that's a place where those meta emotions come up, which are the feelings that we have about our feelings. Like, man, I worked on that. I thought I had it, and I guess I don't. Know that it's okay. Know that by you noticing that this is coming up, that is still a sign of growth and healing, because now you're seeing what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And the next time something like that comes up, maybe you're triggered a little bit less, and you're able to see, oh, I see you. And like, when we talk about curiosity and courage, man, wisdom from the mouths of babes.
All the time.
Come at whatever it is that you're going to come at it with, literally with a child's curiosity, wonder, and courage, and you will go so far.
Mm-hmm.
You will take yourself so far.
You will. Be kind to yourself. Be careful with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. And we would love to hear from you. You're welcome to share your experience, especially if some of these things resonate with you and help you open something up. We love to hear stories like that. But also, what's a myth that you feel like you've subscribed to? We can bust. A step you're taking that you're helping to embrace yourself. Send us a message or share on social media. You can like, comment, subscribe, email to
at goodloveproject@gmail.com, or, you know, we're Good Love Project pretty much everywhere.
Pretty much everywhere.
Yeah. Be sure to tune in for our next episode. We're going to be talking about your pleasure map. We're going to be exploring desires and boundaries. Yeah, this is going to be like a fun, juicy episode.
Oh, good. So yeah, next week, plan to sit down. Maybe you take a note or two. Maybe you have a little piece of paper ready, and we're gonna see what we can build in our pleasure map.
Yes, I love a good pleasure map. Until then, take care of yourselves. Keep learning, exploring, and growing. Keep on good loving.
Bye, good lovers.
Bye.